From the Kansas City Sports Update Studio, this is the Richard Smith Show, where we talk about all things Kansas City Chiefs, brought to you by Arrowhead Update. Don't forget to check out our Royals Update podcast with Kevin Monk. Check us out on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Player FM, YouTube, and all third-party applications. Also check us out on all major social media platforms. And if you can't find us there, just Google The Richard Smith Show and Kansas City Chiefs, and I promise you will find it. Let's talk Chiefs. How are we doing, Kansas City? It is Thursday, May 30th. And we are here to talk Chiefs, and our subject tonight will be OTAs, and to break down what OTAs are and the fundamentals behind it and what we have going on with the Chiefs and OTAs. I have with me tonight another great piece to the Kansas City Sports Update team, Kris Chavez, our senior NFL analyst, also now an analyst on the Richard Smith Show. How are we doing tonight, Kris?
I'm doing fantastic, man. How are we doing tonight?
I'm doing well. We're here to talk about OTAs tonight, and before we get into the details of what's going on with the Chiefs, I want to give Chiefs Kingdom and some of those fans out there an idea of what exactly OTAs are and what they mean to the Chiefs, so they'll know the magnitude of really what we're talking about here. So a team may have 10 days of OTAs with a maximum of 3 OTAs a week for the first 2 weeks. During the first 2 weeks, a fourth non-OTA workout is allowed, but Phase 2 rules apply. Obviously, no contact, no pads, with some other things that I'm really not aware of. No live contact is permitted, but 7-on-7, 9-on-7, and 11-on-11 drills are permitted. No pads except protective knee and elbow pads are allowed during OTAs. Helmets are also permitted. OTA days last 6 hours. And if you're not really familiar with OTAs, they are voluntary, and most of the veteran players do not come. It's more for the rookie players to really adapt to the team and kind of get a head start into the season. But there are some veterans out there that like to get in there and get an early workout or get in with the rookies. So with that being said, let's get into the OTA edition here of the Richard Smith Show. And Kris, what do you got for us tonight, bud?
All right, so I just want to kind of sum up Week 1 OTAs. Week 2 has started, and I believe they finished up today, but I'm still trying to get a bunch of information on that sorted out. But based on the stuff that I have, I'll add it in as we get through the night. So Week 1, first thing is the absences of the guys who weren't there. We had our offensive lineman Cam Irving and tight end Travis Kelce, who weren't there due to recovering from off-season in surgeries. We had Anthony Hitchens, who was not there due to his baby's birth. And then the big one that a lot of people were really upset about was Chris Jones, our defensive lineman, who's not showing up due to presumed contract reasons. My issue with everybody, again, upset about this is this guy is in a contract year, and it's important for him to come into the season and do as well as he can and be as healthy as possible for himself. And I understand from a team perspective, we need him here. We need him to understand the concept and all these changing things. But he's got to look out for himself.
Absolutely.
And he's got to... And the thing that a lot of guys, and you said this in your lead-in, and these are voluntary workouts. If this was a mandatory workout, if this was preseason in camp, then I would be concerned. Yes. But he even sent out a video, and I'm not sure if it was on Twitter or Instagram or somewhere else, of him working out. And it's not like he's taking this easy, but he is working hard to put himself in tip-top shape, A, for the contract, and B, to be productive and to help the Chiefs attain that Super Bowl that we're chasing this year.
Right, and I feel like that Chiefs Kingdom I know that, our passion obviously wants us to have every player on the field from the beginning, but as a business standpoint or a personal standpoint for Chris Jones, or I would want to say Patrick Mahomes, but he's there because the kids die hard. But if you're a franchise player and you don't want to be involved in OTAs, there's not a person in that franchise who's going to say a word to you. So, and more than likely, they don't even want you out there for OTAs. So that's the thing. It's really for the younger guys to get their groove in and really get a head start on the veterans for the season. So I'm with you. I want them to understand that as a franchise player, you really shouldn't be out there in OTAs anyway.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say I was going to move on to the defensive coordinator differences here and what we have going on in OTAs and kind of giving a breakdown of, what Spags is doing compared to what Bob Sutton was not doing, as well as Matt House. You brought up some good points here that I see in the notes that I'm going to kind of let you take off on here, but there's some really, really good analog from the players and the people in the organization about, how much depth that Matt House and Spags is going into it. So go ahead and take off on that and let Chiefs Kingdom know what's really going on with our defense.
Sure thing. So, doing my research, I've kind of analyzed what people are saying and what they're not saying, both about Spags and what he's doing coming in, as well as Bob Sutton and what he didn't do last year. And so this one particular guy said that the differences were very recognizable, that Spags is much more hands-on. He's willing to get in there and work with the guys, as opposed to what I'm then reading through the lines is Sutton would then be coaching from the sidelines and just talking to them, as opposed to getting in there and showing them how it's supposed to be done, why it needs to be done that way. This is the sign of a true teacher and a true coach, because they're synonymous. It's the same thing. And Darren Lee is the one who was also making the similar comments about the linebacker coach, Matt House, that he described him as great, fiery, energetic. He loves the way that he coaches. He pushes Darren Lee every single day. And then he's all about helping that he's helping for sure in the meeting room, but definitely pushes you out on the field. Right,
and I think one thing I want to interrupt you, but I want to bring this point up to Chiefs Kingdom is the difference between being a defensive coach and the magnitude that you have as far as pushing your players on defense compared to the Andy Reid approach on offense. Andy Reid's more of a relaxed coach, but when you have a Patrick Mahomes who's taken over the offense, there really needs to, if everybody's doing their job, there doesn't need to be any pressure on the offense. On the defense, I feel like if you're a defensive coach, you should always be pushing your players at every point in the season, every moment, get the best out of them. They deserve that, number one. Number two, the Chiefs deserve that. But I just feel like as a defensive coordinator, it's your job to push these players to their limit.
No, absolutely. And that's really the thing that stands out for me is going through all of the changes that we've gone through this offseason. And our defense is now looking for a true identity, because we didn't really have one last year. We were searching, we didn't really find it.
Our identity was dead last, almost, but you know what I mean?
Yeah. And there's articles all over the internet about Frank Clark saying, and we need to find our identity, blah, blah, blah. And Spags knows that. House knows that. And he's coming in and they're saying, this is going to be the tone. This is what we're going to be about. This is what we're doing. Mm-hmm. And no disrespect to Sutton in this regard, but he couldn't do that for us. And again, I'm not trying to offend anybody when I say this, he was too old to have that energy and really put it out there.
Right.
He never came across as that energetic coach who's going to light up his players in the huddle like they did in Remember the Titans, and they're not going to get one more yard.
Yeah, and he's not that coach. And that is the thing, is you need the passion-led coach on the defensive side like we have in Spags. And, you know, like everybody loved to say about Alex Smith, I mean, our defensive coordinator, Bob Sutton, was the biggest spectator on our team. And you're right, he was too old to put the energy into it. And you can't, I mean, how are you going to have any passion on defense when there's nothing coming from the top?
Yeah. And that's the thing about leadership, is that it comes top down. And when your leader is not willing to make the changes, putting out that energy and inspiring his players, the players are then going to put out a uninspired performance on the field, and we saw that all last year.
Right. Passion is addictive. I mean, if a coach puts out passion towards his players, that's what he's going to get in return. Every player on the field is going to want to kill himself for that coach, because it doesn't just show that he cares about football, he cares about them personally. And I don't know about you, but it's like a Marty Schottenheimer. What player did not want to absolutely just kill himself for Marty Schottenheimer?
Absolutely, yeah.
So
way to connect to yesterday's podcast, by the way.
Yeah, gotta connect the dots a little bit, man. Absolutely. I appreciate the recognition there.
Just one other thing I want to throw out there really quick is not just the defensive players are commenting on this, but offensive players are also noticing a difference in the defense as well. Patrick Mahomes was quoted as saying that they're getting after it for sure. First off, they're doing a lot of things, different things, and it's hard to get a kind of read on them. So it's definitely challenging to the offense, especially the quarterback position, to kind of see what coverages they're in. Mahomes then said that the defense was making things more difficult for him, but he thinks that that's a positive. That is very helpful that they're doing so many different coverages, so many different schemes, one high, two high. For those of you who don't know, they're referring to the safeties. Everything that they're doing is really challenging me, and it's making me not necessarily have my first read every time. Every single time, I have to adjust on the fly.
I love the fact that he's having to break down and go through his progressions and stuff, and I like that he doesn't have his first read every time. And I know that's, dude, look, I guarantee you that he picked apart our defense all season last year and the year before, and now he finally just has a defense on the other side of the ball that's challenging him. And me personally, that's going to take him to another level.
Absolutely. And really looking forward to see how that's going to push him off. And I don't want him to jump into it right now, but we're going to talk about it later on as to how that's already paying off for him later on in the show. All
right. So we've touched base on Mahomes and Mahomes having to break down and do his progressions. We've talked about the difference that Steve Spags is making compared to Bob Sutton. So let's talk about the linebacker that we got from the Jets, Darren Lee. He's been saying some things as well, and acknowledging that there's a lot to do on the defense. What's Darren Lee been saying?
All right, so again, I'm going to quote him here. Learning the defense is not something easy that can be learned overnight. So obviously there are going to be learning curves. Everybody's different, but I know that the energy in the defense, from what I've seen the last few days, everyone's excited, but everyone's patient. That's what you like to see out of a group of guys. So this is very telling to me on many different levels. Mm-hmm. First off, he recognizes that he himself, coming out of college, had a learning curve. And that his learning curve with the Jets organization was short because it never really went anywhere.
Right.
He didn't develop. Here in Kansas City, he's going to have a longer learning curve because it's not like we're pressuring him. We didn't give a first-round draft pick on him, so we don't have to put a whole bunch of pressure on him. There's nothing that says that, he has to be starting right now. No. He can sit behind somebody and learn his position and then eventually come in and contribute. It'll be fine.
Yes. I think the biggest thing is with all these guys is, this is competition based, and at this point, I love what he's saying, but let's be realistic when it comes down to it. We're gonna have to go in front of our first opponent, to really see where we're at here. But continue. I didn't mean to cut you off there. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. You're making a really good point as well. Because this is the off season. They're playing without pads on, and there's no real contact happening. Everybody's in contender in the off season.
Right. Everybody can look good when you're running up and down the field with no contact and no pads.
Exactly, and it's once you have that first snap, that's where things really start to take a different toll.
Right, but when we look at where we were last year on defense, and you're quoting these things from these players, still, regardless, as a Chiefs fan, and I'm sure you agree with this, and so does Chiefs Kingdom, it's nice to hear these things because, your take on it, I love because, it's a bigger picture and you understand the philosophies behind football, and so, I love the fact that Lee also brought up the point that everybody is being patient, and so being patient. I want to know what your take is, what Kris Chavez's take is on being patient as a defense that's learning right now.
So patient would be a matter of sitting back, learning, and truly analyzing the play that they see in front of them analyzing what they're really doing and not just running out into the field and doing, but like taking the time to actually analyze why.
So they're covering all the unturned stones before they really get out on the football field and get into a situation where we were last year with the defense.
Yeah. And the other thing that he also brings up, and again, I can tie all of this back to his experience with the Jets and where he's at now with this new defense that he's coming into with the Chiefs, is that he's also noticing that everyone's excited. And again, that's that energy talk that we're getting from House, from Spags, and the players seem excited. That's the key thing there is that they're excited, but they're also patient.
I think. Go ahead.
So you have that bottled up energy, and they're waiting for it. They're waiting to explode. They don't want to blow their load, so to speak, in preseason. They know that there's something bigger coming, and they are going to be patient to truly show it off in the regular season, in the postseason, in that Super Bowl game.
Yeah, and it's definitely coming. I know these guys are chomping at the bit, and especially the guys from the year before who've really been sitting on their hands that everybody thought had been a disappointment. I can only imagine the energy level in those guys. And so we look at the energy level as a whole this last year. I mean, it's been huge, and our defense was horrible. So imagine the energy level that we're going to have when we're 5-6 weeks into the season and we're 6-0, and it doesn't look like anybody can touch us. That's what I'm excited about, and it seems like we're headed in that direction. It's just putting all the pieces together. But I think Spags and House are the right guys to do that, and Chiefs Kingdom's finally starting to take heed of just what they bring to the table.
No, absolutely. And then just kind of tying in some other stuff that I heard from this week's OTAs as well, is that there's competition at every single position. And not that we didn't have competition in the past, but to have competition at every single position. I mean, I was even reading a report before getting on with you tonight about the punter position, and that the Chiefs were actually really high on, I believe his first name is John Fox, the punter that they brought in to compete with Colquitt. Normally when you bring in an undrafted free agent to compete with your signed punter or kicker, it's just competition. It just kind of saves the leg a little bit for the regular season. But they're actually trying to push Colquitt, A, to become better, or B, see if there's somebody better out there that we can then bring in.
Honestly, it's really at a point with Colquitt where I mean, I don't want to say he's descending, but he's an older guy. That's the oldest player on our team, and at some point, we have to look at replacing him. And we spent a lot of money on Colquitt, and it's deserved. He deserves what he gets. He deserves the money. But you're right. I mean, I like the fact that somebody else has been brought in to push him a little bit, because let's be honest, if you're a punter for the Kansas City Chiefs, the best special teams in the NFL for the last decade, I mean, you pretty much have a smooth sailing career ahead of you. You really don't have to do a whole lot.
Uh-huh.
So I like it. I like the move. I like seeing the next man up mentality. It kind of seems to be a trend in Kansas City for about three years now. So we've talked about all that. We talked about Darren Lee. We've really covered base on a lot of dialogue from the Kansas City Chiefs locker room. That's kind of hard to get unless you're doing some digging or really, really reading about the Chiefs. So we've covered the defense, which is extremely important. And before we move on from the defense, let's touch base on the linebackers, because the reason why I want to key in on the linebackers is our defensive line is fine. I know everybody's worried about our cornerbacks, but I think our cornerbacks are fine because they're not going to be left on the island this year. They have support over the top that's really going to Thornhill and the Honey Badger. So I really I look for things to even out in the secondary. But linebackers, what do you think? We're switching schemes up. There's a lot more linebackers in our linebacking core than people realize, but we also need more than we've had in like 20 years. So where are we at with linebackers?
So linebackers, I think we kind of touched on this in our last show, but we need to have a lot of versatile, speedy linebackers.
Well, I mean today, like where are we at? I know what we need, but where are we?
Yeah. So we've got thumpers. We've got some speedy guys. We've got some guys who can cover out in the flat. We've got some guys who can stop the run. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people don't realize this, but we have a safety who can drop down and play a linebacker for us.
Yes.
In packages.
Yes.
And we have the safety.
He is a football player.
Amani Watts back there. We can throw Sorensen back there.
Yes.
And we can still be competitive.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree. Honey Badger is a complete football player. He's not just a safety. He can play every position on the field.
Yeah, you can literally line him up anywhere, and he's going to make a contribution. He's going to shut down the offense in some way, shape, or form.
So I'm going to predict this. We have some ball hawks. What we covered the last time on the last episodes, we realized that there's a lot of speed, there's deep motors on our team, and there's ball hawks. So in my mind, I feel like the Kansas City Chiefs defense this coming up season, I think we're going to be a 30-40 sack defense with 10 interceptions and maybe a safety. I think we're going to get back to the defense that we're so accustomed to in Kansas City that's been lacking the last few years. What do you think?
30, 40 sacks? That's it? Nah, I really think that we could probably be pushing closer to 50 sacks this season with the defensive line that we have. Depending on the scheme and how blitz happy Spags is, but I really think that we could hit 40 to 50. I think we probably have two guys for sure who should have double-digit sacks in Clark and Jones.
I would hope so.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with what we're gonna pay Jones, and then what we are paying for, or what we paid for Clark, that's what we need to get our money's worth at.
Right, and I guess it really depends on how do they start at the beginning of the season. If they start off slow, I don't say they get to the 50 sacks. If they start out, fast like our offense does, and it doesn't take them a couple games to really mesh, we could get there.
No, absolutely. And it's really just an average of 3 sacks a game, and because of some of the matchups that we'll have, we should be able to really tee off on some of those quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Rivers has always been a statue for us. We've been able to kind of terrorize him back in the pocket, and we get to face him twice. So really looking forward to that. Denver's going to have Flacco back there, which, okay, all day, man. We're going to be trashing him up like crazy.
You know, and you're right, because when I look at our schedule, we have a defense-heavy schedule. There's more defensive teams on our schedule than offensive teams, and you could be right. I mean, we could have a record-setting year because, I'm not going to bring it up into detail right now because I don't have our schedule in front of me. But if we did and you took a look at it, I think you would agree with me. I'm going to put my foot in my mouth because we very well could have 50, 60 sacks this year. So we just got to start out fast. I think that's a possibility with Spags and House. I see them being down every defensive player's throat if we're not being perfect.
Yeah, and the thing is like the first game against Jacksonville is going to really set the tone, and it's going to put the rest of the league on notice. Hey, Kansas City actually has a defense.
Yes. And okay, so our defense is definitely going to step up. I'd like to see it above a top 15 defense, and I think we're headed in that direction. But more importantly, the offense has to have, almost as good a production as it did last year, if not matching that type of production. And so there's a lot of good analog coming out of OTAs about Sammy Watkins, and you had talked about Mahomes already and him going through his breakdowns and things and really smartening up as a quarterback and not just going for the home run every time. It's nice to see him go through his progressions. But with the dialogue that we're having within the Chiefs organization, what would you say the direction is as far as our offense and our skill players?
Well, speaking of stepping up, Watkins has really taken on that leadership role this year. He wants to be more of a leader to especially our young wide receiving core. Beyond him, we don't have anybody who's been in the league more than 4 years on our roster at wide receiver. And so he really is the quote-unquote old guy on the team in that positional group. And he really wants to do things right for himself, but to also show all the young guys as who look up to him, or that they should look up to him, and see this guy does it right. He finishes the reps. He uplifts everyone. He's doing things right. And I know that within Chiefs Kingdom, Watkins has a reputation of not finishing plays, of not fighting for every yard or taking advantage of every yard. But to hear that coming from him, and that he's kind of changed his mentality, I'm not going to say, totally different mindset of the guy, but I'm hopeful that we're going to see a new Sammy Watkins this season.
And I agree. And this is the quote that came from Sammy Watkins was, I think that's kind of my role now. Lead and do things right so the young guys can look up to me and see that this guy does everything right. Finish the reps and uplift everyone. And I'd love to see that in Sammy Watkins, but I'm at a point with Sammy Watkins and his career, you got to show me. You're going to have to show me. You've never even really talked before. So I don't want to say his talk is bigger than his walk because he's never really been vocal either. So this is the first time that you've really heard Sammy Watkins come out and say, I'm going to step my game up. I am the leader on this team. I'm the veteran receiver, and I need to take that role. And I like it. I just want to see it.
Well, and I think it's a great thing that to hear that as well, because I think here in his second year in Kansas City, Watkins has truly settled into Missouri, because you're bringing up the state motto of the show me. Missouri's the show me state, man, and I think that's where a lot of Kansas City fans are at. You can talk about it, but until you show me, things aren't going to change.
Right.
But I think that Chiefs Kingdom is going to be very open-armed to welcome that new Watkins into the fold.
And yes, and I'm going to speak for them as well, just like you did. We absolutely will be. I want to touch base. I'm going to change the subject while we're talking about wide receivers. I saw an interesting tweet today.
Okay.
Patrick Mahomes had made a tweet, and I can't remember exactly what he said, but Terrell Owens replied and said, "That's my quarterback." I don't know what that's about, but that was absolutely on social media this morning.
Huh.
Just throwing that out there. And I think it might be on the Kansas City Sports Update page. Have to hop on there and check it out. I know, it's hard to keep up with that. There's constant news rolling through the Kansas City Sports Update Facebook page. Check that out, fans. A lot of in-depth stuff. Same with Chiefs have Mahomes. So yeah, look for that stuff on Facebook and social media. Okay, so we've talked about Watkins here and him stepping up. I touched base briefly on the social media post because it is kind of interesting, and do some digging on that. Somebody might come up with something that we haven't found here. Kansas City Sports Update. But tell us about Andrew Wiley. What's going on with Andrew Wiley in OTAs? It's kind of interesting, and I'm excited to see where this goes.
Yeah, so Andrew Wiley, for those of you who don't know, was the Chiefs Rookie of the Year last year. He stepped in mid-season and really performed well on the offensive line for us. But this year, he's making a switch from right guard to left guard on the first-team offensive line, which is rather significant because, as Reed says about him, is that Wiley's one of the better athletes we have up front there. I don't think people know that. He's a good athlete. He gets out there and he runs. He's able to lock onto people, glue onto people in the screen game. I don't think that's a huge adjustment for him.
And I don't think so either. And to be perfectly honest with you, we'll go right back to Andrew Wiley, but I think the bigger question from Andrew Wiley moving from right guard to left guard is, who are we putting in at right guard? And in my mind, that's the bigger question.
Yeah. Well, and we have Cam Irving, who might move in there, or depending on how he comes back from shoulder surgery. And then the other option, and I'm not saying that this is necessarily going to be where we go with, but we could potentially be looking at LDT. The Canadian, I can never pronounce his name right.
Tardif?
Tardif, yeah. I'm just going to call him Doctor.
There you go.
Or the other option that we might also be looking at would be the 6th-round draft pick that we took last year. The only quote-unquote offensive player that we drafted, it was a defensive tackle that we were converting over to the offensive line. I don't feel that he'd be ready to necessarily step in as a starter, but it might pave the way for him to step in at some point.
And that's one of those things also. Depending on the package that's on the field, he might work his way into certain scenarios, throughout the game, but obviously, not be a starter. So would you say that there's some question marks on our offensive line, or do you like where we sit? I love the fact that, look, Tardif is a big anchor for us. And really, Wiley stepped up too, and he showed it because, he stepped in last year, right, for the last half of the season and did great.
Yeah.
So Wiley's really impressing Reed, which is good. You don't really hear a lot about the offensive line because our skill set players really take the cake of the conversation as far as offense. And let's keep it real. How could you not? So let's talk about Mahomes and mid-season form. And Mahomes finding whoever is open, because that really has, look, he said a lot in OTAs that's made us realize that he's growing as a player. And, he's always said since day one, keep running. And so obviously we're all excited about what Mahomes is going to produce and bring to the table here this next coming up season. But is he going to be in mid-season form again at the beginning of the season here, or what are we looking at as far as Mahomes in this coming up year?
So I don't know how things went in the locker room after that final game against New England, but I think everybody who watched the press conference saw just how upset Mahomes was. And for anybody who saw episode 1 of, I think it was The Franchise, last night on Facebook or wherever the Chiefs released it at, he basically started working in, like, as soon as that press conference was over, he was already working for this year. And Reed and Eric Bieniemy, the offensive coordinator, gave Mahomes some cut-ups, some video work to start working on and analyzing himself. Whereas going into last year, they didn't have any tape on him from our system to really show him, like, okay, this is what you need to work on, this is what you're doing, this is how you need to progress. So last year, he had to base everything off of Alex Smith cut-ups and what Alex Smith had been doing. And so this year, he's been able to actually analyze himself. And it's going to be really telling to see what he can do week 1 against the Jags. But also to take into consideration is that Mahomes came in to OTAs, quote-unquote, in mid-season form when he came in, mixing it up with different receivers. He wasn't just throwing it to his name guys, the guys that he's familiar with from last year. He's throwing it to Sammy Watkins, to Damian Williams, to Garrett Dieter. He's finding whoever is getting open, which is great. And then something else that you touched on was that he's telling everybody, just keep running. He told that to Hardman as soon as we drafted him. Just keep running. Today at OTAs, Hardman dropped a pass because he didn't keep running. And it's almost like you know exactly what Mahomes is going to say to him as soon as you get back into that huddle. Keep running.
Don't slow up.
So that's going to be a great learning experience for Hardman.
Yes, and that's going to be hard for a player with Hartman's speed like that when your entire life you've had to slow up to catch the ball, and then you hit the professional level and you've got a quarterback that expects you to catch that ball in full stride, which isn't easy to do. So that's honestly, that's a big learning curve, and that's something that in his neurology he's going to have to figure out here really soon.
Yeah. And then going back to one other thing that Mahomes said after having analyzed all the tape is that he's learned a lot learned a ton that he still needs to improve on. Last year he made a lot of plays off script, and that he missed a lot of open plays, and he really wants to work on taking the easy completion for a first down as opposed to taking the risky throw. Which is, going back to our last show, why I also feel that he's going to have a better year, but he's going to put up less ginormous numbers.
And it could, and that's one of those things that could really go either way. I'm interested to see what happens when we have a team that takes pressure off of Mahomes, because typically when you take the pressure off of a quarterback, he produces more. But let's be perfectly honest with you, I doubt we could get Patrick Mahomes on the field any more than he was last year. So
I think if our defense can create more turnovers or stop teams more often, we actually probably could see him on the field at least maybe 3 or 4 more times per game. That ends up being another 20, 30 times over the course of the season.
Gosh, you're right.
And if he played like he did last year, we could see a 60-touchdown season.
Gosh, and you're right about that. And that's something, look, there's been a few people that I've talked about that with, and even I want to say Ryan Reed was one of them. It's one of those things where you want more production. It's hard to top 50 touchdowns and 5,000 yards, but if anybody's going to do it, it's going to be Patrick Mahomes. And it's going to be with a team that has a stud defense that can put him right back on the field. I guarantee you our production on 3 and outs quadruples this year compared to last season.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. With the team that we've built, hope that if it doesn't at least double I'm going to be extremely upset.
Right.
With all the pieces and players that we've brought in, the expectation is, I don't want to say extremely high, but it's high. The defense needs to perform better, not as good as. It needs to be better than last year.
Yes, and
where we were at last year, completely unacceptable this year.
Look, it should be night and day, in my opinion. And when you're right, it was completely unacceptable how we played on defense. So we look at those regards. I mean, it's not going to be very hard to top that, but at the same time, I want a significant difference. I want us to get excited about our defense being on the field instead of being worried every time they touch their toe on the field because we have no idea what's going to happen. And it doesn't matter what team it's against. I mean, we just got walked all over. So, we have really touched base on a lot. I really love hearing Andy Reid saying that Patrick Mahomes is in mid-season form. And I kind of got a little bit out there asking about him starting this coming up season. But look, you're right. The biggest thing that's going to be a difference for Patrick Mahomes this year is it is his team. The foundation is already there. The craft is his. Now all he's doing is polishing his craft because this is his offense. He knows it up and down. And when you know it up and down and you can make the throws like Mahomes does, look, a coach like Andy Reid is just going to add to the offense and add to it and add to it and add to it until it is just a monster that nobody can even touch because they have them so confused that they don't know what we're going to throw at them next. I think that's a good thing to have Mahomes in mid-season form and OTAs before most of the guys have even been on the field yet.
Well, I think that's also going to raise the performance of the players around him as well because they have to be at mid-season form to be able to hang with him as well.
Absolutely. And look, the timing's got to be there, and that's why you keep saying keep running. And when you get the timing down in OTAs, wow. Then you get into training camp, and then we'll get into preseason. And by that time, these guys are so polished that they could do this stuff in their sleep. So, the Kansas City Chiefs have always had an awesome tradition. And we've always, it's been Chiefs Kingdom. It's die hard. But it seems like there's a new philosophy, that's being brought into Kansas City right now, whether it be on offense or defense. And I want to know the philosophies that are going on. And there's dialogue behind these philosophies from players within the organization. But my philosophy really is, this: we're stepping into our prime as the Kansas City Chiefs. And the players know it. The organization knows it. The NFL knows it. It was just like back in the day, okay, when we would play John Elway, and it would come down to it, and it was 2 minutes left, and John Elway had the ball in his hand. Look, he knew he was going to do it. They knew he was going to do it. We knew he was going to do it, and we were just waiting for him to break our heart. And that's what we have in Patrick Mahomes, and it's going to happen time and time again. So my philosophy is we're shooting for the stars, and we already got the moon. So what's your take, your philosophy, and then the dialogue coming from the locker room and OTAs?
All right, so my philosophy coming in is dominance. And that's offensively. I mean, you look at our offensive numbers last year, we dominated, period.
Yes.
But the philosophy that we need to bring in this year is that defensive dominance as well.
Yes.
And we've always dominated on special teams as on top of that. And so you dominate in every aspect of the game. You should win every single game or be at least competitive in every single game. And even looking at last year, yeah, we lost games, but we were competitive in every single one of those games.
Every loss we had combined 6 points.
Yep. And that was over the course of the season.
Yes, 6 points is our combined total points that we lost to all together. And to me, that's incredible. That's incredible. And we were in every single one of those games competitive, one play away from really winning all of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this year with a much more dominant defense, we set that tone, we changed that philosophy, and we changed that outcome at the end of the season.
Yes, and that's the thing is the only thing that really does need to be changed besides the defense is the outcome of the end of the season, and I think that Ryan Reed said it best. He said that the mentality inside the locker room right now is the trophy's ours. Now we are just going to get it. It's just the road to go pick it up and put it in our trophy case, Kansas City. It's time. This is probably the most exciting time that you could ever have as a Kansas City Chief. And in my mind, next year, or this coming up season, is probably our best shot at the Super Bowl ever. And there's something that me and you didn't touch base on before we get off here because we're kind of running out of time. But your predictions for next season, and you've heard mine a couple times, so I'm going to go ahead and throw them out there again. I feel like we're going to go 14-2, lose to the Chargers, and we're going to also lose to the Packers. And we'll, sweep the playoffs, have home field advantage, and proceed to the Super Bowl by going through Arrowhead Stadium against the New England Patriots, and we will win the Super Bowl, and it might be against the Rams.
So my prediction is very much in line with yours. I'm thinking 14-2, potentially as low as 12-4. Kind of taking into consideration some significant injuries at some major positions. But the teams that I think are going to give us the most trouble, I mean, you kind of have to say the Packers. As long as they have Aaron Rodgers under center, they're always going to be competitive. And then the Patriots, they're going to give us a very good big run for our money. And unfortunately, again, for the fourth time in 4 years, I'm probably exaggerating a little bit there, but it seems like every single time that we've played them recently, it has always been in New England. NFL, if you're listening, you need to make this right, because it's supposed to be a 1-1, one home, one away. And for us to have to play for the third time in New England in a row is a little ridiculous.
I completely agree with you, but to be honest, I'd love to beat them up in their house too.
No, I absolutely would.
But
I think that those are going to probably be the two teams that give us the most trouble this year.
Mm-hmm.
And because of our conference, I absolutely think that any one of our divisional rivals could give us a problem and a surprise loss here or there. But I don't see anybody beating us out for winning the division.
Perfect, and that's how I feel as well. So what do you think, Super Bowl?
No, absolutely. I definitely think that we make it to the Super Bowl. And I would love to see the Rams in the Super Bowl with that offense and their defense and the way that we performed against them this past season. I would love to see that matchup again.
Me too, but I'd love it to favor the Kansas City Chiefs this time for sure. But it might have been the greatest regular season game I've ever watched in my life, and I can't think of one that would top it. I can't.
Yeah, I think I had like 4 heart attacks that night. It was a truly amazing game. Along
with you and everybody else in Chiefs Kingdom and the 100,000 people that were at the Coliseum that night. I mean, that house was rocking. I was pretty surprised. I wasn't surprised to see it turn out like that, but I forgot how big the Coliseum is. Yeah, no, and it was a special venue. The stuff that was going on in California at the time, it was a truly special night, and I'm happy for their city to be able to experience that night and take their minds off of the fires that were ravaging the area at the time. Good for them, good for their team, and good for us for putting on a great show for them as well. Yeah, I really didn't. I didn't feel bad about that loss at all. We put up a heck of a dogfight, and our defense actually stepped up and made some enormous plays, and that was fun to watch because we didn't get to see too much of that last year. So Look, at Kansas City, with that being said, this is our show tonight. We talked about OTAs and the significance that it has for the Kansas City Chiefs and where we're standing right now, midway through OTAs. So, Kris, it was a pleasure having you on the show again. I really appreciate you. Your insight is one of a kind, and look, welcome back. I'm sure Kris will be on here next week, everybody.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. It's been a pleasure. I really look forward to being on again.
You absolutely will. We really haven't broke out the schedule for next week, but Kris Chavez will be on the show here coming up. So everybody, thank you for tuning in. Kris, thank you for being here. Check us out on all these major social media platforms. Chiefs Have Mahomes, the Richard Smith Show, Kansas City Sports Update, Arrowhead Update. Check us out everywhere. I mean, we really are everywhere. Kansas City Sports Update is getting big here. Thank you, Kansas City, for tuning in. Look, the weekend is almost underway. One more day at work, and y'all can take off for your weekend and eat barbecue and drink some beer. Let your hair down a little bit and have some fun. So, Kansas City, thank you for tuning in. From the Kansas City Sports Update studio, this is the Richard Smith Show, where we talk about all things Kansas City Chiefs, brought to you by Arrowhead Update. Check us out on iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Player FM, YouTube, and all third-party applications. Check us out on all social media platforms. And if you cannot find us there, just Google The Richard Smith Show and Kansas City Chiefs, and I promise you will find us. Have a great night, Kansas City.